Here we go now.
Good evening. Hi. Welcome back to the Lynn Show. This is the last episode of this season. After the new year, we'll be back with you, and thank you for joining us. Tonight, we have what we always think is a great program, and we hope you will as well. But tonight's program is entitled, When Life Gives You Lemonade, Innovate. Okay? You can make lemons out of that, but we want to go like one step more. And so tonight we're going to talk about innovation, right? We have crazy times in our lives, and is this spurring great ideas? Is necessity the mother of invention? Because great ideas will come from pressure, and like a diamond, and or a pearl under the sea, right? The pressure, the irritation, the difficulty can produce beauty and wonder and greatness and thought and innovation. We have two amazing guests tonight. Ryan Eisenman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Arch. Okay, Arch is a technology startup digitizing alternative investment management. And Ryan Eisenman will be joining us. He is a local New York or Manhattan JEC community member. And then we will be joined by Ezra Galston, the founding partner of Starting Line, early stage consumer focused VC firm based in Chicago. And Ezra and I go back a really, really long way. Okay, in fact, day one of my collegiate rabbinic career at the University of Pennsylvania, I stood on the walkway with my wife and said, how do you meet Jews? If I can't meet Jews on a walkway on campus, then I shouldn't be a campus rabbi. So we figured that out. We got into the right headspace, meditated, breathed, whatever we had to do, psyched ourselves up, and walked down the walkway and met students. And one of the very first students we met was Shira, who's now Shira Galston, Ezra's wife, and their beautiful three children that they're raising in Chicago. And Ezra and I go back now a long way. So it's great to have both of them here with us tonight. And before we get into it, just to share a little bit of an idea about innovation, we as Jews, like, innovation is key for us. It's so key that the word, you'll see in a moment, the word for new, chadash, or hitchadshut, innovation, newness, freshness, like innovation is not something that's just like limited to the management books and like how to be great, good to great and successful entrepreneurs and stuff like. It's actually in our calendar, in our timeline, because the word in Hebrew for month is chodesh, the same word, chidush, chadash, hitchadshut, and chodesh. All those words, which mean some sort of innovation or newness, actually are the same word or same root as the word month, because every month the moon renews itself, and it is a spiritual potpourri of power of renewal, which is not only something that we Jews see as our life goal, to be able to pick ourselves up and rebuild ourselves and renew and bring freshness and newness into life. It's probably one of our surviving traits of how we've been managed to pick ourselves up, having been kicked out, tossed, thrown, beaten, purged, Auschwitz, and then pick up and create the state of Israel and the startup nation, right? This is chadshut is built into our calendar, built into our life cycle. And so let's look at it now as a young professional, right? In today's world, the world out there in a COVID crazy world. Okay, so let's start right now with one of our own community members, Ryan Eisenman. Let's bring Ryan on. And Ryan, hello. How you doing? Great to have you.
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Okay, where are you right now? What part of the country are you in right now?
In New York City in the West Village.
There you go. Okay. I got it right behind me, green screen. So Ryan, you are the co-founder and CEO of Arch, technology startup digitizing alternative investment management. Okay, yeah. So those are just words that I'm reading off a bio. But before you did it, you're in our community, you're a Birthright Excel Fellow, co-chairing the Accelerate Summit, and you graduated from Vanderbilt, the BS in Human Organizational Development, and you are now the co-founder of this startup and this wild niche that you identified. So tell us a little bit about what Arch is and when you started it and what it's actually doing right now.
Yes. So Arch is a technology company whose fundamental purpose is to digitize how private investments are managed. So what does that mean? Private investments we define as direct ownership of private companies, real estate, any kind of hedge fund, private equity fund holding. And so if you think about kind of who does this apply to, this applies to complex investors like endowments and pension funds that invest across these asset classes. And to give a comparison, if you think about kind of currently how people manage their public market investments, they may have a Morgan Stanley or Fidelity or Robinhood account. You log into one place, you can see all of your holdings, you get one tax document, and it's all digital. That paradigm doesn't exist currently in the private markets. So trying to build that for the private markets.
And what, you didn't wake up one morning and say, should I do like a food cookie delivery startup, or should I do a private investment, management data system? Like, how did you get into this?
So my father was a financial advisor, and so saw a little bit of that world through his lens. And then a lot of kind of the pieces came together in New York City. A huge proponent of living in New York. I think there's a lot that can happen, and a lot of opportunity, and a lot of chance encounters. And one of these chance encounters was I went to a Shabbat dinner about 3 years ago. Met a guy who was extremely interesting to me. And at the time I was trying to think about a few entrepreneurial ideas, but potentially going down more of an investing route. And this guy had done both. So he became a mentor to me. And he had the problem that I had an early thesis on. So he and another investor became our early clients, and they were able to build our software around these two early clients. And this investor also introduced me to my two co-founders. So was able to start this with great people.
Okay, can we just plug that like big time? Innovation, key to success, Shabbat dinners, basically.
I believe it. I think that time after Friday evening is like the best time to both unplug and meet new people and learn new ideas. So huge proponent of Shabbat. Okay,
good. That expansiveness of mind that Shabbat's supposed to bring works for business also. Just to be clear, you're not allowed to do work on Shabbat, but that means like actually doing transactions. To be able to discuss what you do and why you do things, and for ideas to come in, that's okay. It's good over there. That's good to hear. So let's our subject's innovation. I know you got a lot to say. You've been very innovative. So you're on the ground. So give me a little bit of your insight. When we ask the question, what is innovation in today's day and age in this world, right? What do you think are the guiding principles that you've worked with, and that you feel that people should be sensitive to in order to grow and to propel ideas, innovation, and their careers?
Yeah, I think innovation actually isn't too complicated. It's just applying a concept from another place into a market, or applying it to an idea that is novel in that particular arena. So I think there's like a lot of tried and true frameworks. There's a lot of ways that people understand how business is done, or how kind of the world is changing. And then if you just apply that to an industry that hasn't seen some of those new ideas, that ultimately is innovation. So it's this marriage of disparate ideas that creates kind of a new sum and a new total.
Now, is there anything unique in your mind to this COVID experience that has helped you per se to advance Arch in ways that you might not have otherwise?
Yeah, I think COVID is an extremely innovative time. Like any time there is a fundamental disruption of how we live, it forces us to reassess basic assumptions that we take for granted. So there's like a big notion of defaults that I find extremely interesting, of what are the defaults that have been given to us, understanding kind of where those defaults come from, and then how that shapes our behavior. So like going to an office on a daily basis could be a default, or drinking coffee in the morning, or exercising in a certain way. Just the ways that we've come to perceive that life should be lived. And so when you have a global pandemic and you're no longer going to the office, and you're no longer with the same people, and you have to stay at home, or you have different constraints on living, I think it forces that fundamental reassessment of what you're doing. And we face that as a business. So kind of going into the March timeframe, we were on a linear path, had clients that we've been talking to, had a pipeline, and we're kind of trying to just continue go day after day and close another client and work towards our long-term goals. But when clients start putting things on pause because they're facing a lot of volatility in their business, and they need to find ways to make sure that they're going to survive and they're going to handle all the stressors that they're handling, that leaves us with additional space to think and kind of changes the structure of the work that we're doing, and our entire team goes remote all at once. So with those changes, kind of forces a lot of questioning of assumptions, new thinking. And I think out of that, we've kind of come up with some different ways to work.
So one thing I'm picking up on here is like Shabbat dinner on one hand, and exercise. You and I spoke about this and how sort of your external routine can really help your ability to process or think, clear your mind, so to speak, right? What are the things that you've done or you felt during COVID, like have just changed the way you've been able to sort of think about things and the freshness with which you approach new problems?
So I think there's a couple of things in this. One is like when COVID happens and your whole structure is disrupted, figuring out the things that you like and the things that you didn't like of your previous routine, and then figuring out the things you need and the things you don't need in this new life. Like for me personally, I think I need to move every day, whether it's exercise or just going for simply a walk or kind of being outside. And so ensuring that we don't succumb too much to the environment that we found ourselves in, but then also just being able to figure out like, well, how do I work best? Do I work best if I'm constantly connected and pinging my team and getting emails and getting calls, or do I work best if I can go through my inbox a few times a day in a concentrated period and then spend longer periods of time disconnected from things that are trying to pull my attention, so I can go deeper into the subject matter where I feel like I can actually make a difference and kind of do some deeper types of work.
I mean, that's good. That's not a COVID thing. That's good at any point in time when you're trying to strike that balance and give yourself space. But it does feel like COVID is allowing people more of a rethink of their, like you had, like normal habits. They're added what your normal routine is, and changing that up actually does a lot for the if the medium is the message, right? If I change myself up, then my ideas can change and innovation can sprout. But now there's a little bit of a almost a contradiction in philosophy over here. On the one hand, in a time like COVID, you want to be conservative, you want to circle the wagons. To be innovative somehow seems to bring with it the notion of risk. Okay, how do you balance that idea of taking risks, of being innovative, of going out on a limb with ideas? With the knee-jerk reaction that we have in times like this is sort of to be more conservative.
Yeah. So I think in any situation, I think risk has to be balanced. So you have to figure out, okay, what are the things that I need to make sure are stable? So it's shelter, it's food, it's like enough social interaction that you don't go crazy, things like that. And so ensuring that you, and then if you're running a company, your employees and the people that you care about and your employees' families have what they need to be comfortable in their situation. So I think that is first, and that can relate to a couple of different frameworks, one of which is like Maslow's hierarchy, where you have to ensure that you have the basic things first.
Yeah.
But once you have those handled, I think then you can like balance risk and take more risk. There's a writer that I like a lot named Tim Urban who wrote an article called The Cook and the Chef probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And his whole notion was there's this risk spectrum of like, if you rate risk a 1 risk or a 9 risk, maybe 1 to 3 aren't risky, 6 to 9 we are risky and we know are risky, and then there's stuff in the middle that we think is risky but isn't really that risky. And so I think that starting a company in a lot of ways can be that middle version of things that are perceived as risky but aren't necessarily risky, because we're still kind of wired to our hunter-gatherer selves from 5,000 years ago, where if we fail, then we starve and we die. In this case, if we fail, then we go back and live on our parents' couch until like they feed us chicken soup until we're ready to go back and try again.
Generation Z problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we actually should take more risk. Like the world is beautiful.
You got the couch and the credit card behind you, like Lily's saying. Take the risk take the risk while you can.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think out there in your peer group and everything? A lot of people are in startups, and what do you feel is the difference between life and death in the startup world, success and failure? Is there anything that strikes you, that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, there of course is a ton of luck in everything, and a ton of luck in the startup world as well. The idea you choose, the team that you go with, the market, how people react to you. But also within that is a lot of just placement and perseverance and appetite for innovation and risk taking. So I think you just kind of constantly need to be trying to every day improve. And if you improve 0.5% or 1% every day, that magnifies itself over the long run pretty significantly. And I think we're really used to these media stories of like an Instagram founded, and then some small period later, call it 18 months, they sell for $1 billion to Facebook. But then if you look at a lot of the enduring companies, a lot of the companies that have shaped industries, they're at it for 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years before they meaningfully shape an industry, go public, do things that are seen in the public realm. So I think there is just this notion of like grinding continuously in a direction, surrounding yourself with really smart people, and continually trying to find ways to innovate at the edges, run experiments thoughtfully that don't take too much of your business direction, but allow you to kind of have a good risk reward of, if that experiment goes well, then it might lead to significant opportunity in some way.
I like that line, innovate at the edges. Ryan, before we say goodbye, some advice for people out there in this time of COVID that you can give for people to think about, sort of to chew on, that you'd like to share.
Yeah. So this is a question that I've been asking people lately that I think is really interesting, of like, what would happen if tomorrow everyone was vaccinated and you're expected to go back to work on Monday, and expected to go back to work and go back to your routine as if it was February of 2020. Mm-hmm. And I think that question, for me at least, makes me think, okay, well, there are things that I really like about this period, and maybe I'm not yet ready for life to go back fully to normal. And there are things that I want to accomplish now before we go back to normal, before the world opens up again and we get dragged back into our routines. So I think just being conscious of this will end. It's like the old, this too shall pass. Right. Relishing in the things that we do uniquely have here, that we may ultimately look fondly on when we have that kind of hindsight bias of not dealing with the day-to-day struggle, but looking back on the things that we did enjoy during this period, and then kind of being thoughtful about that transition when it comes.
Right. It's great advice. I mean, listen, you're young, we're all young, okay, but relatively safe in the COVID world. And but this time, this period will offer opportunities for that you should take advantage of. So good, great advice. Thank you, Ryan, so much. Thank you for joining us, and we do wish you like the best of most of success in your endeavors with Arch, and really appreciate your insights and taking the time to join us. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Thank you, Robert.
In the village. Okay, Ryan, thank you. Okay, good. Innovate at the edges, right? Think Shabbat dinner. That was a great plug. That wasn't rehearsed. That was off the cuff. Great. Anyway, thank you, Ryan, very much for joining us. Our second guest tonight is Mr. Ezra Galston, and it's great to have him on board, the founding partner of Starting Line, early stage VC firm in Chicago. He was before that, a principal at Chicago Ventures, led many investments in boards, sat on many boards of companies, Cameo, Spot Hero, Chow Bus, Maiden Cookware, M1 Finance. And he lives in Chicago, as I said, married to Shira, one of the first people I met in 2004 at the University of Pennsylvania, and their 3 beautiful children. He was, before he became a VC guy, he was a very skilled and poker player, professional poker player before school. So it's great to have him here. He has that risk nature to him and that confidence and swag and je ne sais quoi of a guy that you don't want to sit across the poker table with. Anyway, Ezra, thanks for coming here. How you doing, Ezra?
Quite an introduction. Thank you, Rabbi.
I'm just glad you're on my team. That's all, because you got that, poker face is something that I've been working on for a long time.
You're my favorite rabbi.
Thank you for coming from Chicago to our little thing here in New York. Okay, and enjoy. So innovation is to be honest, you and I go back a long way. And when my team said let's do a show on innovation, so they're like, who do you have, Rabbi Lynn? I'm like, I got Ezra, right? So it's not it's not like I'm on your board or anything like that. I know the details of going, but I know you, and I know what you do, and I know that the idea of newness and grabbing things that are and trying to find that innovation, those great ideas is really your specialty. So here we are. So tell us a little bit about what you do. Okay, in your professional capacity right now.
Sure. I mean, we invest in early stage startups. We focus exclusively on consumer internet, consumer product, consumer service startups. And so we kind of love to find entrepreneurs at the earliest stages as they're thinking about what they want to do to change the world and give them cash that they need to kind of catalyze that. That's my extraordinary team. Haley on the left, Ade on the right. We've recently added Scott. We need to get some new photos.
Are those the Bee Gees in the back?
What's that?
Are those the Bee Gees in the back?
Yes. So we work out of an office here in town. It was built by a very successful businessman named Larry Levy, of course, keeping it in the family.
Yeah.
And he is a big art collector. I'm not at the office now, but God willing, I'll be back there one day. But yeah, we love exploring innovation at kind of the edge of behavioral change and kind of mass macro secular change. So kind of trying to think about where the puck is going, how people are starting to act differently. And obviously, as Ryan alluded to, a pandemic is going to be a pretty interesting time.
Yeah, so let's drill down on that for a sec. Okay, so mass behavioral change. I can't remember the other thing you said, but let's innovation, right? Pandemic. Let's talk to that. I like the puck analogy. You're wearing a Chicago Blackhawks hat on. So you're in the hockey season, even though it's not hockey season, but you're in it. Okay, good. But let's drill down. What are the things that give rise to great innovation and that are germane to our situation right now out there, pandemic world?
Yeah. Look, so the way that we tend to view kind of value creation, so to speak, from which is annoying investor speak, is that it has to come at the root of some sort of inherent behavior change, right? So the most obvious example is mobile phones came out. All of a sudden, you have this world-class computer in your pocket that has GPS on it and knows where you are at all times and can send you messages at all times. So just inherently, there are going to be new businesses built around that. Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Grubhub, right? All these businesses were leveraged by the fact that we know where you are at all times and can innovate around that. One other way to actually get to find ways that people are behaving differently is if we're forced indoors for months on end, or if we can't see our loved ones in person, or if we can't go on date nights, or if we can't relate to people, right? There are certainly, the current pandemic has a ton of mental health implications, right? Sure. There's just a lot of innovation that's forced when people start behaving differently. One way to get people to behave differently is put the world's strongest computer in their pocket 24/7. Another way is to force them to upend and change everything in their lives.
Are there some examples that you've seen now that have come to the surface because of COVID, because these mass behavioral changes already, that's where you see that impact?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some what we call kind of net new that just didn't exist before, but really what you've seen is just an acceleration of a lot of trends that probably would have happened anyway, right? You, Rabbi, you have 8 children?
Yeah.
8, right? So you probably ordered on Amazon before the pandemic. Right. And you are probably in overdrive. Your house probably looks like a cardboard recycling plant, like mine does at this point, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So there's been acceleration. Some of the ones that we've watched is especially with people's kind of store, their physical stores closed, and a lot of people losing their jobs. People have turned themselves into businesses, right? So Etsy and companies like Etsy that was you can sell any tchotchke or whatever, any homemade good, or Fiverr where you could kind of, or Upwork where you could rent yourself out to do kind of digital marketing, advertising jobs. Those existed before, but they've just gone kind of in overdrive since the pandemic happened. But that's following a similar trend of people becoming their own business, because in many cases they don't have a business to go work for, or the business they had is no longer relevant. I'm on the board of a company called Cameo that has this kind of core innovation that there are a lot of people in the world who are more famous than they are rich. So how do we kind of help them monetize their image and likeness better, right? That's obviously become very relevant because people are consuming more and more media during a pandemic, but you have a whole lot of people who maybe have a large audience on YouTube, but just don't earn a whole lot of money, right? So Cameo comes in and allows them to monetize that. So there's a lot of that. I can go into more if this is interesting, but that's kind of some of the stuff.
Interesting to me, yeah. I mean, I it's not my market, but I imagine the dating. I know because as a rabbi, people come to me I gotta find my soulmate. It's that the dating world has been crushed by Corona.
Yeah.
And then you have something called Corona Crush, which is well, how can we leverage everything and get people to meet in different ways? I mean, I'm sure the social media world is. You had the mainstays of Facebook and I remember MySpace. Is that still around, MySpace? Right, but those things the old dinosaurs in a sense. But right. I'm sure there must be a ton of new regimes of connection.
There is. Look, I mean, I think it's not only your students. Like, my wife and I are struggling to figure out how to do date nights. We started playing Magic the Gathering again, right? Because like, what else are we gonna do? So yeah, but it's a good point. So the way that we look at it is like, with the exception of TikTok, it had been almost a decade since you'd had any innovation and kind of like true kind of consumer mobile connectivity app on your, that's my team again, hi, true like kind of consumer mobile app on your phone. Like, I don't know, Snap is probably a 2010, 2011 kind of company. So it's been almost a decade, with the exception of TikTok. And all of a sudden, if you go look at like the iOS or Android charts, you see so much new consumption of kind of new apps that, whether those are kind of watch parties or group chats or random meet and greets. We're on, our team plays with a few of them, like kind of business networking of like 5 minutes thrown into a different video chat every 5 minutes, because people are so desperate to like interact with others, make new human interactions. I think it's really complex stuff. But if you go and see what's kind of trending and what's getting installed, there's a huge amount of new demand for new products, whereas we'd kind of been habituated in what we were using for the better part of a decade. And a lot of that is starting to evolve.
And just like the markets react to announcements from Fauci that, in June sports stadiums will be full, I think that's what he said this morning. How do you see what's going to happen to all this innovation? People are obviously rushing to take advantage of pockets of space, of desperation on part of the consumer. In your more experienced view of things, you calm and 30,000 foot bird's eye view, where do you think this is going when things start to trend back to normal? What's going to be left, the residual impact of all of this massive innovation during this time?
I don't know. I'm not. We don't predict the future. We try to be acutely aware of kind of patterns that we can see in front of us. But I don't believe that we're in the business of predicting the future. That said, some things that certainly seem relevant.
Invest in that. I mean, you certainly will put money into things with a bit of a prediction. Like, I think this is going to do well because of market demand X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, we see. So the way that I describe our investment thesis to our own LPs, our own investors, is like, we are betting on kind of kernels and sparks of change that we see evolving, that we believe are going to compound and grow radically fast. But we're wrong more than we're right. That's just the business that we're in. It's just that when we're right and, those markets grow 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times, a year after year, like you do well. But some of the things that we're definitely trying. So, it's interesting. Like, there are a couple, we invested in a business, it's actually in New York, called Schoolhouse. And they basically had they're a bunch of educators, and they basically had as their thesis that small group pod-based learning was just a better pedagogical experience than just a large school, right? So obviously with a pandemic, that thesis is going to come into the forefront, right? Sure. The question is, what happens when there's not a pandemic? Do people still want that type of learning? We believe the answer is yes, but then there's some things you need to solve for, right? Meaning it turns out that kids still want to have a lot of friends, and parents still assume that the proper educational experience is in a school with dozens, hundreds of students, right? And other families, right? So all those things need to be solved for. But I suspect that a lot of what we've learned over the past 9 months is not going to be forgotten. It's just going to be like, how do we integrate that into our lives heading forward? Zoom is obviously a good innovation. Sitting on 10 hours of Zoom calls a day is obviously not a good innovation, right? So like, what is the hybrid there, and what's the compromise and balance? Life is all a balance, as you taught me, Rabbi.
Yeah, I'm trying. I want to bring Bianca on. She is our director of outreach and
hello, Bianca.
Director, engagement. And Bianca fields some questions from a lot of our community members here for these shows. So she's going to bring a couple of questions at you, Ezra, from the field. Hi, Bianca.
Hi, Rabbi Lynn. Hi, Ezra. It's so nice to be here with you.
You as well.
Thanks for agreeing to do this. It's been very interesting to hear you from backstage. Question number 1 for you is, what are you looking for in startups at such an early stage? What's an indicator for future success when you look at these startups?
So again, we're wrong more than we're right. But the way that we look at it is, we look at it in the following kind of 3-part framework. that engagement drives retention, which drives growth. And so we typically look for a really kind of like I described this like kind of spark or kernel earlier. We don't care if the products that you're building appeal to dozens of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people, or millions of people. We're very comfortable with kind of like small kernels, but we want to see like an extraordinary kernel and spark that is really kind of manifesting itself in a material way. So we want to see people who are just kind of obsessed and love what you're building. And so that creates the engagement. If they really obsess and love about it, then they'll stick around. They'll typically tell their friends, and they'll kind of help bring people into the fold. If you're doing something that's really, really innovative and creative, that they want to tell their friends about, like they will go and do that, and they'll actually help kind of expand the market for you, and that's what causes growth. That's kind of the framework that we look for in most companies.
By the way, it sounds like my mission statement. When I asked in Jewish education what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to light a spark in someone that's something that you would be able to see, or someone walks around like, whoa, I'm alive, I'm on fire. I feel that kernel in me is growing, and that Jewish identity is something which becomes then contagious. That usually be a good word, contagious, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be careful around that. Like, I don't think we want people are addicted to their phones enough as is. We try to look at things from more of a fundamental, like, passion and engagement perspective, rather than just like, can you send them a kitschy, text message that's going to bring them back? That stuff doesn't tend to endure. Turns out humanity is actually pretty resilient to, like, we'll see. I don't know. We watched that. Everybody probably watched that Netflix documentary about how we become kind of like labs in the rats in like the Facebook lab, whatever. It's complex. Yeah.
Okay, so my question number 2, well, not my question, the question that has been submitted, second question is, how quick is, because you basically touched on behavioral and cultural changes. So how quick is a shift in behavioral and cultural changes? And is it a slow shift in society? Is it radical enough that you have to actually pivot in strategy? How do these startups kind of like tune into the new times? And is that something that you can see coming and say it's going to be night to day, we need to absolutely pivot? Or is this something that you need to take into account, but not necessarily needs to move you that much?
Yeah. So from the startup perspective, well, it's a little bit, so obviously the pandemic is really, really different than anything we've kind of seen before. Satya Nadella's words in his first earnings call at Microsoft after the pandemic basically said, we've seen a decade's worth of growth in 45 days. And if you look at like the charts of how many people bought groceries online pre-pandemic and post, it was and the general e-commerce charts, it's like growing linearly over 20 years, and then it just basically doubles overnight. It's basically a decade to 20 years of innovation kind of pulled forward. That's really exciting from my seat, because that's what I've been focusing on and learning about and studying for the past for I don't know, my entire life, right? So that's an interesting opportunity to make new investments. It obviously has like often pretty I don't know, dangerous implications for the rest of the world that I think we all kind of have to band together as a society and as a government to try to figure out, because not everybody is as technically proficient as kind of the Gen Z millennials are, right? And so that's something to think about. The second part of the question, like, how do existing companies respond to that? I mean, that's just kind of classic innovator's dilemma. That these changes, like the classic Clay Christensen about innovation, is like, companies, keep getting better and better and better, but they don't really know what to do. So they keep kind of innovating their products on the really, really high end for their highest customers, and the products become so complex and bloated that they forget about kind of all the innovation on the bottom and just making things simple and appealing to the new behavioral change. So someone goes and appeals to that, captures that market, and then starts going and capturing a lot of those existing customers. I think that's just kind of so I think it's really hard to respond to behavioral shifts. I think for actually big companies, the pandemic could have been a bit of a blessing, because I think it's a lot of stuff that they would have otherwise overlooked. But everybody gets together and goes, what's our response to the pandemic? Whereas kind of existing technology change happens so gradually that it's easy to miss, right? A lot of companies, didn't have a great digital strategy until 2017, 2018, may not have, even still, you look at a company like, I don't want to say it's a Chicago company, but like Walgreens didn't really have a great digital strategy, and there's been real implications of that. Sorry if anybody works at Walgreens. I love the business, just digital strategy wasn't totally there. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how we tend to think about it.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Arlen. Thanks, Ezra.
Okay. Ezra, tell me, as friends, it's crazy out there. I always enjoy speaking to you anyway when we get to catch up and get our insights into life and into what's doing. Obviously, I think that there's I think maybe easier to chart the economic shift in the VC world. Of course, now, in my business, the spiritual world, it's been harder to grasp, right? You don't see a rise all of a sudden. It's like you order groceries, all of a sudden everyone's running. It's this is taking a toll on us. A lot of people, in the rabbinate, people are coming with a lot of sense of despair. We know what mental health is dealing with these days. Right now, it's a bit crazy out there, right? It's a bit crazy. In your world, besides the business side, and because so many young people are in this world, they're in the startups. I mean, in the old days, at Penn, you were just you were trying to get the Goldman Sachs job, and that was it. In the 90s, whatever it was, like, and now it's all, everyone's got a startup when they're a freshman in college. What are you sort of seeing in terms of just the human component of this pandemic and this is the field of operation, the theater of operation for young people in this country in the main is the startup world, the technology world. What have you what do you feel is going on behind the scenes, sort of underneath the veneer of the marketplace?
It's really hard. As you know, because my wife was one of your first students. She is a world-class marriage family behavioral therapist, and it's funny. She actually works with a lot of entrepreneurs. One of the reasons is, she'd see me in our bathroom just so I could kind of get away from the kids at, when they were up late, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, taking calls from entrepreneurs, and she would often comment like, "Why are they calling you?" And I'd talk about how hard their lives were, and she would say, "Yeah, but why are they calling you?" And it kind of took me a moment to realize, like, well, they've got no one else. They don't, a lot of times they can't necessarily be as vulnerable with their co-founders or their employees as they can with someone who's on their board and or just an investor or a friend knows has their back. So we, as a fund, we actually invest in mental health for a lot of the entrepreneurs we back. We subsidize their mental health. Is we're a small fund, but up to a reasonable amount. But net, it's really complex. It's really exhausting.
Yeah.
People are running really, really fast. I've had a few entrepreneurs kind of screen share their calendars to me, and it's just insane. The good news, if there's kind of a silver lining, it's that I've never seen more innovation in the field of mental health. So there are a lot of really smart people, a lot of people in my demographic or just a younger age group who are aware of this. I have a general theory that, like, I don't know, maybe it's a Torah value that humans are very resilient and tend to regress to kind of a general sense of health. For instance, I used to run a program for kind of students. This was 3, 4, 5 years ago, college students in the VC world. And they would tell me that when they went out to dinner, they would all take their cell phones, put them face down on the table. And
Sure.
if someone reached for the phone, they would have to pay the dinner check, right? Because they all recognized that their obsession with
Right.
notifications was unhealthy. So my hope is that there is a huge amount of innovation, whether that's mobile apps or enabling people to connect with therapists in the right way, or even text message kind of therapists to some degree. And my hope is that continues to proliferate, but it's tough. It's really hard.
In my Hollywood days, you used to go out for dinner and you weren't allowed to talk about the business. You had to speak about other things. And then if you did talk about the business, you had to pay the bill also. Same kind of, that was the Hollywood version of that. Now, you and I are both married to family therapists. So we're either really great husbands or we're great experimental for them. One or the other. We'll leave that for their show to decide.
Yeah, that's right.
It's great to see you, Ezra. And thank you for coming on and joining and giving us your insights. And you do amazing stuff in your personal life, in your professional life also. I'm a huge fan of you professionally. I'm a much bigger fan of you personally. And I know that you really stand behind who you are as a person. And I think that sort of metal and is really what we need to be peddling more than anything else out there. That really is the commodity that I think hopefully people will come to realize is the most precious commodity out there. Your word and your dignity and your and the balance of things and your, mental health and sanity and vision and goals. So
Thank
I
you.
always appreciate your time and our friendship, and thanks for joining.
My goodness, this was a blessing. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Ezra, thank you. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining. I hope you found that innovative and informative. Just reminding you that we have Hanukkah next week, and in New York City, we actually will have an outdoor Hanukkah event at our new outdoor space. So look out for that on Wednesday night. Okay, around the world in 8 days, the Hanukkah party, December 16th at 7 p.m. at the Annex. We have a new location right down the block on 13th Street between 6th and 7th. It'd be really cool. Come and join us. It's outside with heaters and lamps. So, we want to make it as COVID friendly as possible for everyone to come and celebrate as best we can Hanukkah together. And of course, the Hanukkah menorah is about bringing light into the darkness. Innovation, of course, is bringing new ideas into a world of a void and so filling that with newness. And of course, in the bowels of the darkness, in the cold of winter, we Jews take a Hanukkah menorah which is full of warmth and light and beauty and mesmerizing, tantalizing flames that will give us the inspiration spiritually to realize our potential and be what we need to be. Wishing everyone a happy Hanukkah. Please join us if you're in the city on Wednesday night. Sign up on the website. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you after the new year, season 3 of the Lynn Show. We get there. Good night. Thanks for coming.
Here we go.